everyone, my name is Jonathan. I'm a senior strategist, MBA coach at Crimson, and today it's my absolute pleasure to welcome Shubham in our office here in Singapore. Shubham is an applicant I've worked with for almost a year to 2 years, if I recall properly, towards his MBA application, and he's here today to talk a bit more about himself, his journey towards business school that I'm going to keep secret towards the end. You will know which school he's going to. Shubham, thank you so much for being here today. I know that you're very busy preparing for your flights to start your MBA soon. So very much thank you for coming down. Why don't you start with maybe a quick introduction about yourself?
I'm Shubham. I was born in India. So I was originally from India, but I grew up in 2 different countries. I was in Oman for 4 years. And then for the past 16 years, I have been in Singapore. And then I did my chemical and biomolecular engineering from NUS. After which I did a process engineering role in a semiconductor firm for 1 year. And then for the past 3 years, I was working in an oil and gas firm in their supply chain space. So out of those 3 years, the first 2.5 years, I was in a rotational supply chain management program, which I graduated in last December 2023. And then for the past 6 months, I was their supply chain planning supervisor, handling their Singapore facility that's here.
When we first met, your dream was to basically secure an admission offer for the INSEAD MBA. What was the key driver for you to kind of recalibrate your objectives and to maybe change a bit the path that you were aiming for?
Initially, I narrowed down on INSEAD and some of the other European schools. Quite naturally INSEAD because it felt closer to home. It has a campus here in Singapore. Also, I thought it would be done much faster. And I thought my profile might make me easier to get in compared to some of the dream schools that people have, like the M7s or some of the top tier schools.
What were the elements of your application that kind of maybe motivated you to look at the M7 kind of schools? What was the turning point in that journey? What kind of elements were more on the side?
2 things. One is our CV, resume. And the second one was the essays itself. I know we started off with the essays for INSEAD, but as and when we were doing the essays and I was reflecting on my story, the development that I've gone through, it kind of helped me realize my strengths and how I could picture them or bring them into light in a better way.
Can you tell the audience about that specific program that you trained at Halliburton and why do we think that it had an impact on your whole application?
So the program that I was part of is called the Supply Chain Management Program. It's like a 2.5 years program. The basic, the purpose of the program is to develop high potential leaders in the company through a fast accelerated pathway. So every 6 months, we are pursuing a project in the supply chain space, be it procurement, planning, manufacturing, etc. We also have a 1-year rotation as a supervisor in one of these departments. So I felt like the 2.5 years program really boosted my leadership skills in a way. And then it was also giving me a lot of exposure into the different departments of the supply chain. So as I went through the 2.5 years of program in Halliburton, it not just improved my leadership skills, but things that come along with it, like communication, collaboration, teamwork, presenting in front of executive leaders and vice presidents. We were in fact even taken to the Houston facility every 6 months to deliver presentations there. So I think the switch from Micron to Halliburton was pivotal in exposing me to the leadership skills that some of the top tier schools also look out for.
Obviously, the first CV you sent me before our first meeting was a fairly drafted CV, right? You didn't really have to do a CV, and I think a lot of engineers are going to shoot themselves in the foot now with a CV because they don't realize the impact they necessarily have on the business, and they don't really necessarily understand how they can use the experience and frame it in a way that makes them look very business oriented. Now, to Shubham's defense, when he joined me, I also based on our first discussion, I saw his potential, but I wasn't also very convinced about necessarily a top US school because a couple of things. Number one, obviously fairly young. You apply early in your career. That usually puts some people at disadvantage. But also because the way he described his job was fairly neutral. And once you started working on the CV and the inside essays were very good for that with the prompt about describing your job. Your current job, you started to show the number of direct reports you have, and it was massive. The budget responsibilities was in the multi-million dollars, the direct reports was in the dozens. And then suddenly once we had that CV, we started to see like there was like a lot of potential, right? And I think that's very important for any of you, as a matter of fact, any MBA applicants. And I think you need to go beyond what you think is feasible. You need to really like dissect what you want, what you have achieved. You need to really spend time understanding the kind of responsibilities you had, the kind of impact you had on the business. How overwhelming was it for you, like to work on like the ESS? Like, how did you feel about it?
I remember we had shortlisted 5 or 6 schools that we wanted to work towards. Initially, when I was looking at it, it felt like a daunting process. Of course, writing so many essays and writing so many applications within that specific timeline seemed like a Herculean task. But then as we went through the process, I realized whatever we were, reflecting on and creating the stories, we could actually tailor them to different essays and use them as a trampoline to kind of jump off. Then it seemed like everything was coming together towards the end as well. I think the INSEAD essay served as a good pivoting point going towards the harder ones, especially the ones from Stanford or Harvard that required a bit more thinking and introspection. So I would say the overall application process, yes, in the start, did feel very difficult, very challenging. I think that's what benefit of having a coach is. Like, you kept me, sane throughout the process, guided me to the right directions, and then in the end, when we look back at those 5 or 6 applications, I don't realize like how quickly they went by and how smooth the process was.
Keep talking about the importance of building a narrative, how to position your past, your immediate short-term goal, post MBA, to justify the why MBA, and how do we connect this to like the long-term goal? How much clarity did you have about this like before working on the MBA application?
I think that was one of the biggest areas I found challenging thinking about, because as you know, I have had experiences in a different range of industries, be it in internships, which were in oil and gas, and then my recent experience in supply chain and semiconductors. So tying them all together was a big challenge. Apart from that, bringing in the qualitative skills like collaboration, communication, diversity, working in teams, all of that, I was not able to really think how to bring that together. Especially living outside of India and getting exposed to different cultures in Oman and Singapore. I think when we had that discussion of the advantage that this provides to an international applicant, that's when it struck me that these are the points that if I had done it myself, I might not have been able to bring it out in that right light.
Obviously, with you working in oil and gas, we wanted to bring a bit like the renewable energy, something we've done many times. But at the same time, we don't want to sound too cliche, right? Everybody talks about renewable energy. And we wanted to find something more specific towards, what you've done as well, right? How long did we struggle on like finding those long-term, defining that long-term aspiration?
I remember we spent at least 1 month or so on that. Initially when I came in with my short-term and long-term goals drafted, they were completely off and didn't really align with what my work experience spoke. So when we went through the, long-term thinking of, what should we put into the long-term goals, initially we started off with renewable energy, but we narrowed down to based on what I've worked in the supply chain space. So I've worked on energy efficiency projects, clean energy, all of that. So we tied that to my long-term goal of, pivoting to something more of improving the efficiency of renewable energy or, going towards that path. So I think initially narrowing down to that long-term goal was a challenge, definitely. But as we went through these stories as well, in the essays and everything in my resume, kind of hinted towards what would be the right way to approach this long-term thinking. And then ultimately we were able to kind of scope it down to a very specific goal of improving energy efficiency, clean energy availability in the renewable space.
And during your interview process, has anyone asked you more about your long-term goal? Were you able to defend this vision? How did you handle that kind of questions?
3 out of the 6 schools I had interviewed for, the question did come up in all of them. But I think what stuck with me throughout was the discussions and the essays that we had done. Based on these, I was able to tie it in very clearly because I was able to show a natural progression from my education and experience towards these long-term goals, and how the short-term goal was in fact a springboard towards the long-term goal.
Basically, you're starting your MBA with 4 years experience, right? So 4 years is not bad, to be honest. I would say we're entering the prime, but HBS, Stanford tends to like people who are slightly more experienced as well because they have a more potential. So in your case, I wanted to bring a bit of that, right? And I remember your first draft, everything was there. It was something like a pretty good draft. But I felt that it was a bit boring to read, right? And I came back, I reverted to you, and basically I proposed like something like, I wanted to make the reading more dynamic. And was basically the idea was like to break it down into like more like paragraphs, maybe like I think there was a title for each. And it's something we kind of went with, right? Like we kind of like agreed on like the easy, I would say like the more easy way to read that essay, yeah?
Yeah, definitely. I think initially when we structured the HBS essay, when I wrote the draft itself, I took the same approach that we did for the other essays, trying to bring in, qualities from work experience, from education, trying to put them all together. And then I realized that it's pretty much what gets covered in the application itself, in the resume, it's already there, right? So it's nothing different that I'm putting in the essay itself. And that's what they're looking for. What different, or what else would you like to tell us, or what else should we be knowing about it? So when we put it into the form of, the structured paragraphs with a headline for each headline was like a hook onto what's coming on next in the paragraph, that gave like a distinct flavor to each of the paragraphs, and each of them spoke a unique story for each of my abilities as well. So I think in the end, when we look at the final version of the Harvard essay, there was a certain flow and structure from start to finish. It didn't appear like we had just combined disjointed pieces together from here and there. There was a proper story that went into it.
Now, you submitted the application in the first round, right? September. So like September of 2023. So let's rewind like a year from now. How confident were you when you submitted your application?
Like I had it in the back of my mind that it's of course going to be a very challenging, competitive process, because Harvard, for example, gets 9,000 applicants, only 900 get selected. So it's like a 10% acceptance rate. We did have that going into the process, but when I look back and think about it, I felt much more satisfied, told my story very well. But of course, we also had, out of the 6 schools, we had, selected those very carefully in terms of if Harvard or Stanford or all any of these top schools don't get back, we could at least, have some of the safety schools that we got.
And your GMAT was pretty good, 750, right?
Yes, that time.
750 GMAT is it's good for anyone, including an Indian engineer, right? So, do you remember like last year, which school reverted to you first?
It was INSEAD. Oh no, before that it was London Business School, which was a bummer because it rejected me.
Yeah, and that didn't help my confidence for INSEAD, because usually like INSEAD LBS, we back them both. Usually, like it's so LBS rejection.
Yes.
So how was your confidence level then back then?
It just plummeted totally. Like I'd given up totally. The only next hope was INSEAD, and I was not even thinking about the rest of the 4 schools because of course they are much harder to get into. So when LBS came in, I was fully dejected. Like I think I messaged you also that.
I remember.
And then
I was a bit dejected too.
Because that was supposed to be our safety school itself, and that didn't work out. So I had very little hopes pinned on the other 4. So the next hope was, of course, INSEAD.
All right. So interview prep. How did you approach it?
I think initially, whenever we prepare for interviews, I took the traditional approach. Just knowing my resume, my work experience at the back of my hand. But I think the major decision or the major process that helped me preparing for interviews were the mocks that we did. I felt they were actually much more difficult than the actual interviews that I sat for.
Now for HBS, obviously HBS, I think it's the hardest interviews of all business school by far. Number one, it's done by professionals. They've been doing that for years. They've been trained for this. And I think one thing I'd warn you about, and I warn all of my HBS candidates, is to be prepared for them to know a lot about your work, right? And I think that's something that many people don't realize is due to the size of the HBS network, obviously, the admission team really prepare for those interviews. Like not just about why MBA, why us. Actually, I don't think they ask that question very much during the interviews. They want to make sure that basically whatever you have displayed on your CV, on your essay about your work, is actually real. That you're able to, there is no discrepancy.
Yes, I think we had the interview for 30 minutes. It was 30 questions, so rapid fire, 1 minute per question. The very first question I got asked was, how would you explain Halliburton to an outsider, right? And then the subsequent questions, they took, or they, framed the question based on whatever I spoke. They took up a word and then they framed keep framing the question. So I think out of those 30 minutes, at least 25, 26 minutes, I was talking all about Halliburton, what happened during COVID, what plants were shut down, how did the competitors respond to it, what is the market situation and all of that. So I think, when we anticipated this question beforehand and prepared well for it, I think that helped me a lot in this interview itself, because I was able to confidently speak about my company, and then there were very few questions on my extracurriculars, but nothing of the sort of why an MBA or what you want to do after an MBA, where do you see yourself in the next 5 to 10 years. So it was a very non-traditional kind of an interview.
So how about business school? When you receive the invitation for the interview, you have the choice to do it in person, and then you can also do it online. Which option did you take?
I took the online one because it fit well into my schedule. I was working that time, so it was around 9 p.m. Singapore time, right after work. So the online option.
Okay, so it's great to hear that, because a lot of people think they need to fly to maximize their chances. So when you fly for the HBS interview, there's a trick. It's not just the interview, because you have the interview during the day, and then at night you have a gathering with the alumni, and you're still going to be judged on how you behave with your peers, with alumni. Do you monopolize the attention? Do you speak too much? Do you speak too little? So it adds a layer of complexity. But say Shubham did it online, and what was the outcome?
The outcome was on 8 December, 1 a.m. I remember that very well. Said, congrats, the answer is yes. And then I didn't even read the rest of the admission decision. I immediately pinged you that I'm caught.
I was sleeping. Didn't check until the morning, I must say.
Yeah, and then I couldn't sleep that night just because of the excitement. I told my parents as well, my sister, that I made it.
When HBS came, was there any doubt in your mind that you may go somewhere else?
No, they took like a straight off decision that I'm going to Harvard. So in fact, they asked you to pay $1,000 deposit. I immediately did that as well.
But you don't do it immediately.
I paid
You did immediately.
for my peace of mind.
So HBS was like for you like dream come true?
Yes, definitely.
What about the stress level? So like, you mentioned like one of the key driver for you beyond the name, the prestige, are the people obviously, and the case. So how is the stress level? Does it match the excitement, or is it like not too stressed about like the incoming adventure that you embrace?
I think there's a mix of both, definitely. But I'm putting excitement on a higher percentage right now. I think of the stress after going there. But to tackle the stress aspect of it, of course, I know going into HBS is a big deal. A lot of competitive students, a lot of talented students. But I think in the end, it's all about learning from each other, using the resources that HBS provides to actually do what you want to do, and not really being bogged down by the imposter syndrome of what other people are doing, or how am I not so good, capable as them.
I believe you're the first GIS is going to Harvard Business School, right?
I think I have an alum who has gone there.
There's an alum who went there, right? But very rare, right?
Right.
When you were back at GIS, like in your, let's say, 12th grade, because I know your MBA dream started very early. So I think even in high school. Would you have ever dreamed of like getting into like a top MBA program?
I mean, the dream was always there, but the confidence was, of course, not that much that I would actually go one day into HBS. I'd only seen YouTube videos of the case study discussions and what happens on campus and how Harry Potter world, like the campus looks like. Back when I was in school, definitely I had this dream of landing into HBS someday, but working towards it was always going to be a challenge. That was at the back of my mind. So I think that's where your role also came into play, and meeting you and framing those applications and going through the essays and interview processes just kept firming my belief in the process, and then giving me that confidence that someone from my background can also land into HBS.
Of course, but maybe one thing I would like to ask you is what kind of advice would you give people who are thinking to maybe doing it?
I would say start early, definitely. Don't try to do everything last minute. For example, if you're applying in this cycle, don't come in 2 months before the process and try to just get everything together. Think about what you really want to do after an MBA, why you want to do an MBA. Spend a lot of time thinking about what your career goals are, how you can try to link all of your work experience, education to what you actually want to pursue. The third thing is have belief in yourself. I think what I've learned through my process is a lot of times we don't do a lot of things because of self-doubt or not enough confidence in ourselves. So keep that belief in yourself that you can actually apply to the top schools and get into them. Depending on where you're in your current stage of life, think of what you can actually control. For example, if you have just graduated from university, your CAP or GPA is something that's out of your control right now. So I would focus more on like GMAT and nailing that completely.
90% of your decision is based on the quality of your career. So whether you're an applicant who's going to apply this year or next cycle, what you really need to want to work on, or if you even better if you're applying 2-3 years from now, is to make sure that you maintain the best career evolution. Again, it's been a joy working with you. On top of being highly successful as an applicant, 3 offers out of 6, pretty good, I would say, including HBS. Shubham was a joy to work with. He was very also flexible with me, in terms of sometimes my response time could have been maybe faster, I believe. But at the same time, it's been a real joy working with you, and I really appreciate the chance to have been your coach for this short amount of your life and career.
Yeah, it's been my privilege as well to have you as my coach, and then I'll keep connected definitely for my career as well. I think I've had a lot of advice for me on how I can further my career into what I've set myself to. So thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. Thank you so much, Shubham, and see you very soon.
Thank you.